The presenter of our main talk today is Dr. Natalie Khazaal, an assistant professor of international studies and Arab culture at Texas A&M University, which she joined after teaching at UCLA, Carleton College, Middleburg College, and Georgetown University. She has, which is another way of saying she's really smart. Okay. We have a lot of talent, and she's a fellow Oasis, and she has published research on disempowered and stigmatized groups from ethnic minorities and civilian victims of war to animal species. Her current research is on the stigmatization of atheists and how different atheist communities are fighting back. Natalie has spoken to us before, and it's always interesting and enlightening and thought-provoking, and we're really looking forward to her talk today. So welcome back to the main talk, Dr. Natalie Khazaal.
I'm going to talk today about tempered radicals and stigmatized identity. Can free thinkers change intolerant organizations from within? I'll talk about what skeptics can do to change skeptophobic environments. According to research over the last 50 years, intolerance against other religions and other denominations has decreased enormously in the US. Today, religious Americans feel that they belong together because they share a common identity of a believer. This new acceptance exhibited by the vast majority of Americans, however, excludes skeptics, atheists, and agnostics. Religious Americans reckon that a true American is one who is moral. They exclude skeptics from the fold of the American nation because they perceive morality to come only from divine scripture. Put bluntly, they don't believe that atheists are moral, therefore they're not Americans. This forces many skeptics to hide in a closet of stigma. Having the option of the closet is sometimes considered a plus, since not everyone has a closet in which to hide. Some stigmatized identities can be hidden, others may not. Whereas you can't hide that you're African American or female, both stigmatized identities, you can hide your sexual orientation just like you can hide your religious unbelief. Many believe that the closet can protect them from ostracism or discrimination. Research, however, shows that it's psychologically better to have a visible stigma than one that can be hidden. For example, finding other women to talk to does not present challenges. You can very easily spot who is a woman and who is not. But many atheists never learn that their colleague, classmate, or neighbor is an atheist like them. Living inside the closet of stigma is often described as a private hell. It can cause serious psychological and emotional damage. It also can worsen and even destroy the closeted person's relationships with people from the outside world. It makes one feel like a liar to the outside world for keeping a secret. It also makes one feel like they are betraying their own self for suppressing it. Researchers have long argued that overall it's better to be out than in the closet. Since the closet is always an option and often the default state, skeptics have to make a deliberate choice to get out. This involves deciding at any given moment whether, to whom, and how to disclose their non-religious identity. Research also shows that it's easier to be open about your atheism if the environment is more accepting. This poses the question, can skeptics and free thinkers improve institutional environments to lower the risk of ostracism or discrimination from people with whom they interact at work, school, or volunteer organizations? Openly confronting the system is always an option. You can be an activist in many different ways. But only a few may welcome the risks associated with open confrontation when it comes to the place they work at, for example, being fired. So today, I propose looking at a more moderate approach to affecting social change. And that does not mean that one cannot use many different approaches in different circumstances. This approach that I'm going to propose, the moderate approach, comes from the scholar Deborah Meyerson and her concept of tempered radicals, and the 5 strategies that she suggests that tempered radicals use best to change work, school, and volunteer organizational contexts. These strategies were based on her studying the experiences of hundreds of individuals who dealt with racial, gender, and social orientation bias. Over the years, many have used these kind of strategies to chisel seemingly unchanging systems of discrimination. It's no longer taboo to expect something to be done to decrease racism, sexism, and homophobia. Irreligiosity, or secularity as some call it, is still a taboo, as is requesting that something be done to decrease discriminating against it. I believe that the 5 strategies, these 5 strategies can work to defeat what kind of that kind of bias and discrimination that exists against atheists, agnostics, and apostates. Let me then start with explaining the concept of tempered radicals. Who are tempered radicals? Tempered radicals is not a term commonly used in business management. The word radical might be scary to a business community or leaders of institutions because it may imply to them that tempered radicals organize revolutions or incite extremism. Tempered radicals, though, are not activists in the pure sense, at least not within the work or school organizations to which they belong and want to continue to belong. They are people whose identity or values are at odds with the dominant culture at their organization, but they still want to fit in there.
Sorry about that.
Switch on.
Oh, there's switch the bottom on?
Look on the bottom, there's a switch there.
I think this is better. Tempered radicals are people whose identity or values are at odds with the dominant culture at their organization, but they still want to fit in there. They are committed to that organization. At the same time, they want to remain true to their own sense of self and values. They experience an inner struggle in that sense. They want to fit in and change the system at the same time. They want to rock the boat, yet arrive at the shore safely. They are radicals because they want to change the status quo and because they are part of an organization where they don't fit perfectly. They are tempered because they seek moderation and try to affect dominant culture by interacting with core members of the organization or members who have the power to alter organization policy. They are outsiders within because as outsiders, they see issues more clearly, but as insiders, as Deborah Meyerson suggests, they have resources to do something about changing the status quo. They often feel lonely and alone in their personal struggle for change, but end up being part of something larger that benefits the whole group, organization, even society. Often, though, their efforts are not recognized because it takes a long view to see how they succeed in affecting change. They're not a type of person. They're not a type of personality either. Anyone can be a tempered radical. In fact, many of you already are probably using tempered radicalism in one way or another. And at the end of my presentation, I will ask you for some suggestions so we can learn as a community. Tempered radicalism is a way of being. It's a stance towards dominant culture. The actions of tempered radicals transform them from victims or passive bystanders to constructive agents of change. Do these people matter? Do tempered radicalism matter? Does it matter? Bestsellers on management argue that change in organizations or even whole industries come from swift, large-scale actions, often made by brilliant leaders with acute foresight. For example, we often hear how Apple's founder, Steve Jobs, revolutionized the personal computer industry. However, organizations are not static systems with occasional violent movement. They are changing all the time. And change often starts at the margins. The leaders on the top, whom we see as agents of change, are not the only ones and often not the major agents who affect change in organizations. Little corrections, small wins, can lead over time to vastly different trajectories. The butterfly effect of small actions from all levels within the organization matters often in big ways. So everybody can become or be a tempered radical. Change can be affected every day because tempered radicalism is based on a series of small-scale actions. In this way, every member of an organization can become an everyday leader without having to perform acts of heroism or to give memorable speeches, like mine. How do they affect change? What kinds of strategies did Deborah Mayerson find to work the best? Tempered radicals use the strategies I'll talk about in a second, and many others, not only to affect change, but also to survive within the organization because they cannot remain true to their own self and values if they don't attempt to make things better. Because of their dual allegiance, they live in constant state of ambivalence, which creates also indecisiveness very frequently. In this, they resemble bicultural people who live in two different cultures. One, the culture of their own identity, and the other, the culture of their organization. The first strategy is one in which tempered radicals resist quietly the dominant culture, but they stay true to themselves. They try to fit into the dominant culture, but they do not allow it to define them. Their sense of empowerment comes from their commitment to consider different choices, including to do nothing, because sometimes doing nothing can be a very powerful choice. And also from their commitment to make what they consider the best choice for the given situation. Some examples of that first strategy are displaying a photo of your same-sex partner on your work desk, or, for example, informing the company where you work that you will not be available for any phone calls or meetings after 5 p.m., which eventually might result in the company canceling all meetings and all phone calls after 5 p.m. If we apply this strategy to the context of skepticism, it might mean having a magazine like Skeptic Magazine or Scientific American visible on your desk at your work and reading it during lunch break. The second strategy is when tempered radicals turn a threatening situation into an opportunity for learning. A threatening situation usually involves an affront or injustice that they experience or perceive. Turning it into an opportunity is taking a measured risk to challenge what is considered normal. The risk should not be too great, but it should still be a risk. They can best do that after they manage their own heated emotions that this perceived affront generates in them, and after they separate their public presentation from their private feelings, although without suppressing these feelings, just presenting them in a more appropriate way. That is, learning to frame their agenda in language that has legitimacy among those in power, Not necessarily language that wipes out other perspectives, but some language that those in power would seem as legitimate. This strategy requires validating some aspects of the internal culture of the organization, be it clothing, language, behavior, music, food. For example, if there is an environmentally conscious employee at an automaking plant, they want to promote or help their company start thinking about producing green cars or environmentally sustainable cars that increase environmental sustainability, green cars, by talking about the benefits, the economic benefits that can come from using green technology, instead of how they damage, how other cars damage the environment. Another example is when a proponent of gender equality, for example, asks why a male colleague was praised for an idea when a female colleague who presented the same idea 10 minutes earlier at the same meeting was not even noticed. So asking respectfully is challenging the system in a way that turns a threatening situation into an opportunity for learning within the whole system. Or taking a same-sex date to a company party is also a situation that you turn into a learning opportunity. Another one is if you want to take a company photo, or if you go to meet a client and you have your hair in braids, which basically kind of recognizes your identity. The third strategy is negotiating. It transforms issues that are experienced as personal into larger institutional ones. Tempered radicals speak to different crowds. One crowd may see them as too radical, the other as too conservative. That's why coming up with alternative ways to frame an issue is particularly helpful here. For example, a black woman frequently was stopped by the police because she was driving an expensive car and she was asked for her identity. She decided to ask her employer to write a letter on her behalf, which she presented to the police, and she also asked for a meeting with the chief of the police, at which she sat with the chief and started explaining how actions like that are discriminatory because they single out a particular community, a particular group, and how the police can change its practices in order to recognize that this is discriminatory. So she used her skills of negotiating, she used the whole process of negotiating, and she also presented it in a way that was speaking to a particular crowd, sensitive way, speaking to a particular crowd. She was framing it in that way. The fourth strategy is going after small wins. Small immediate results often produce cascading, sweeping change. Overall, tempered radicalism is a long game. Having small wins helps maintain your resolve and clear purpose because it gives you a sense of accomplishment and empowerment. Tempered radicals sometimes are seen and sometimes are afraid to be seen as hypocrites. They may even think about abandoning the fight or the organization because their psychological discomfort is too high. But a number of small wins helps them to stay engaged and to be committed to the long game. An example that Meyerson gives is when there was a manager in a company who wanted to bring up issues of diversity, but the company, but he understood that the company was going to be very. The company was not open to discussing this issue. So he started hiring minorities, and with every hire, he tried to get a commitment that these people themselves would hire more minorities. After 30 years, the company had over 3,500 minorities, and at that point, bringing up questions of diversity were not only possible, but they were welcome, and the institutional culture was changed from within with these very, very small steps. Now, this is a really, really long game, but sometimes tempered radicalism is exactly that. It's a long game. Another example is that I was thinking about for the context of skepticism is if you buy a subscription for a skeptic magazine or atheist magazine to the local library or to the library of your child's school, and after a year or two, maybe the library will decide to continue with the subscription. So a small win, a small change may result in much larger change of the whole system. The fifth strategy is collective action. This strategy requires building a network of relationships inside and outside of the company to share and appreciate marginalized aspects of your identity. It often involves actively soliciting support. One example was when a female faculty member was frustrated with gender discrimination at her university, and she felt that she was alone, that only she was seeing this issue. She decided to write a letter to the dean, but because she wasn't feeling very secure about it, she asked another female colleague to look at the letter. After looking at the letter, the female colleague decided that she wanted to co-sign the letter. And that was very surprising to the first faculty member, because she felt that she was the only person who would experience that type of, or witness that type of discrimination. After that, they started soliciting the feedback or trying to solicit other female members to join, and as a result, 17 people co-signed the letter before it was sent to the dean, which made an incredibly larger impact. Discovering fellow skeptics and together asking the middle management to consider, for example, how to make the Christmas holidays or Christmas parties more inclusive of religious people might be another way in which small gains or collective action can lead to larger change. And one can, I guess, frame this in a way that it's not just for non-religious people, but also from people, about people from other religions. So to recap, the tempered radicals affect change in two basic ways: by small incremental steps and by spontaneous, though unremarkable, expressions of who they are. The latter resolves feelings of ambivalence or hypocrisy that one may feel, tells us Deborah Merson. Radical action may not be for everyone, but everyone can create a situation where they apply tempered radicalism to change institutional culture. There might be obstacles like when you threaten directly the status quo, or when you are too obvious in your activism. Also, a sense of isolation might force a tempered radical to conform with the organizational culture, even to prove themselves by going too far, becoming too much of the, accepting too much of the identity of the company. By doing this, they risk not being taken seriously, because after being seen for a long time as somebody who is part of the core, they no longer are seen as somebody who represents a different crowd. They just are seen as one of the bland center. Being in conversation with different crowds and being seen to talk to different crowds is a way to resolve this problem. Another obstacle is when compromises lead to co-optation. One can start, for instance, to use what's called insider language. For example, if one wants to change universities' unwillingness to address campus rape, they may adopt the inside language, which emphasizes that we should not single out specific cases or places where rape takes place, but fight against all rapes. This becomes the so-called defense language, which protects the system from changing. Defense language wipes out the very inconvenient questions that eventually lead to positive change. What helps resolve this problem is to speak in both languages to each crowd. So at least people who are experienced or who are susceptible to one language have the opportunity to hear the other without becoming instantly hostile to your conversation. Another compromise that may lead to co-optation is to delay doing something about an issue or speaking out. One often feels unprepared, or it's not the right time to speak out, or they want to do it after their promotion. Sometimes all these are valid reasons to delay a bit, but they may also lead to longer delays so that the right time never comes. And if it finally feels like the right time, the organization might resent what it sees as the sudden lash out that came from nowhere. Co-optation may come from self-imposed cool-headedness also. When others praise a feminist for being reasonable, or a vegan from being reasonable, she becomes even more unwilling to express emotion that fuels her desire to speak out. I want to turn this to you and ask you for your experiences. Have you practiced tempered radicalism? Do you have some examples that you want to share with us so that we can learn as a community to become better advocates for our own betterment?
Thank you so much, Natalie. Good stuff. You radicals, let's hear from you. Okay. Let's see. There's 4. Okay. I think I'll work down this way.
At the beginning of the school year one year, there was an article in the Teacher Association magazine about not putting up religious icons in your classroom. And of course, I'm in small town Texas, and they're all going, this is a violation of our First Amendment rights. And knowing who I had in the room with me, I pointed out, you're the state in this situation. And several of people I knew would back me up. Yeah, you're the state. You're not, by putting up religious icons, you are saying to a specific child we knew who was Muslim in our school, you're not as important because I've got all these Christian symbols behind me. And some of the teachers kept them up, but there were about 5 teachers that went back to their room as before school started, and they took down all their crosses and replaced them with pictures of their families.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, I don't know how many people got to listen to Ted Cruz's speech at the Republican convention. They did get a lot of publicity for not endorsing Trump. But actually, I thought the most fascinating part of his speech was when he gave support to gay rights and actually atheist rights. He mentioned those, he kind of slipped those into his speech. And, it was probably him turning towards his 2020 presidential ambitions, but it may have been an example of a tempered radical. Who knows? I mean, that is the first time he's ever done that. So.
I'm going to be trying to be really open-minded.
My name's Grant Hunter. So I work in a Methodist hospital, and there are oftentimes billboards that are up, or cork boards where people will put up advertisements. And oftentimes they are, come to this church service, come to my church service, I mine's better. And so anyway, I happen to be a big fan of these people are more important than beliefs, little stickers or whatever they have, little flyers. And so I opted to put one up next to all these church service advertisements. And what was funny is it took about 3 days before they were all down. and just one more quick one. There's oftentimes prayer in all of the departments, and they say, gather round, gather round. pretty much the only one who is sitting there who doesn't gather around to hold hands and pray. And I may as well have a big old A on my t-shirt. But everyone seems to be okay with it, and I've had a few people kind of come out of the woodwork to talk to me about it. And I think being there as someone who is a little bit more out kind of helps people who are more comfortable or who are uncomfortable be more comfortable. And if you can kind of guide them into, especially Oasis, or point out a few books that helped you along the way, that's very important. And I've had a couple new OACs come just with that method.
Great. Thank you so much.